a little raise of hands as to who has used Rick to help them travel anywhere. I'm going to put mine up. I'm actually currently traveling this summer to Ireland, and we have the book. So welcome, Rick. We're so excited to have you. We're very, very excited to have him speak to travel as a spiritual act. I think it really represents the kind of people that live at Skyline, adventurous, traveling, intellectual. So take it away. Thank you.
Thank you, Brooke. Thank you. Thank you very much. And it's nice to gather some people together. And it's fun for me to be able to share some thoughts about traveling. And not just traveling for vacation, but traveling with a little more meaning than normal. So it's I've spent 100 days a year, except for COVID, since I was a kid overseas, living out of a 9x22 by 14-inch carry-on the airplane-sized suitcase, hanging out with people who find different truths to be self-evident and God-given. And it's inspired me to come home and work to get the people in our country to get out there and get comfortable with the world. I work with 100 people up in Edmonds. Our motto, our mission is to equip and inspire Americans to venture beyond Orlando. And I think you guys are here interested in venturing beyond Orlando too, I hope. I go all over the country giving a talk called Travel as a Political Act. And to be honest with you, I just took the word political off of this slide and I put in spiritual, okay? I give talks in a lot of churches, and I give talks in a lot of different scenarios. And it's just important to get the most out of your travels, I think. And today what I want to talk about is traveling as a way to do what pilgrims have done throughout the cultures and throughout the centuries. Just try to figure out why we're here and how do we get closer to God, And I just think it is so exciting to be able to leave home and learn more about your home by leaving it and looking at it from a distance. So the conventional way to be a pilgrim, especially for people like us who live in a primarily Christian society, is to go to the Holy Land and walk the steps where Jesus walked and so on, and line up and you kiss the stone where it's believed that Jesus was born in Bethlehem, and you light a lot of candles. And when you do your travels, you find places that are holy in Christendom that have a lot of candles and a lot of people walking around on their knees. And the whole idea is to, get yourself in some kind of a mindset where you can get closer to God. People have been doing this throughout, the Holy Land is the great three monotheistic faiths have their most important piece of real estate right there. And it causes some complications, of course, because they're tripping over each other. But there's a lot of venerable pilgrimage trails in Europe that it's just people have been trekking for weeks and weeks to get to this spot that for whatever reason is holy. This is the cathedral in Santiago de Compostela, where St. James is supposed to be buried. He wasn't actually buried there. It was just the Muslims controlled that part of Europe in the Middle Ages. And they thought, if we can imagine that St. James is buried in Muslim territory, we can rally the Christian troops and everybody will go there and push the Moors back out of Spain and back into Africa where they belong. And we can get Spain back in Christendom. So I hate to be the buzzkill there if you're a pilgrim going to Santiago de Compostela, but it's not all about the fake tomb of St. James. It is about getting away from home and getting alone with your thoughts and getting out of your comfort zone and meeting people who find different truths to be self-evident and God-given. And it's a beautiful thing. It's such a beautiful thing. Just 2 days ago, I was hanging out with Martin Sheen and his son Emilio in Edmonds because they're re-releasing their movie about the way. And it's going to be running again. And I get to be on the little value-added extra at the end of the movie because we're going to talk about how you take those lessons from this pilgrimage and broaden it to make the world your playground. And that's what I was hanging out with Martin Sheen doing a couple of days ago, and they're going to be released in 1,000 theaters around the country in May. And it's this notion that, yes, we can go wherever we go, we can travel as a pilgrim. But I've been on that square in Santiago late in the morning because the last albergue or the last hostel where the pilgrims sleep is a 2 or 3 hour hike to the final finale. And I've been there and I've seen the pilgrims come in. We filmed it. And I'll talk about jubilation. I don't use the word jubilation very often, but when you've hiked for 30 days, 500 miles, sleeping in hostels, listening to other people snore, climbing into centuries of germs in every one of those bunk beds, You finally get to this square and you plant yourself like she is on that scallop shell in the pavement, and you're overwhelmed with joy. There's something about it. I've never met anybody who did the pilgrimage to Santiago that didn't think it was 30 days really well spent. It changed their life. They weren't all Catholics or Eastern Orthodox or other kinds of Christians. There were people that are into organized faith, and there were people that were seeking God outside of organized religion. And there were people that were just broken for various reasons that wanted to get away from it all and think about it and find out where they were. But what a beautiful experience. And this idea of pilgrimage is nothing new. Look, here is a statue of St. Peter in St. Peter's Basilica in Rome at the Vatican. And if you look at his toe here, it's been worn away by centuries of pilgrims just kissing it. Can't kiss it now during COVID, but there's a lot of heritage right there. And for other religions, it's the same thing. There's 1 billion Christians on this planet, and there's 1 billion Muslims on this planet, and we all have our holy places. And Muhammad said everybody should make a pilgrimage to Mecca once in their life. Was it really important that they go to Mecca? Or was it really important they just got on the road and got to know how beautiful the world is, how diverse the world is, and how beautiful their home is? I don't know. But Muhammad did say, if you can't manage to go to Mecca, you can take a pilgrimage somewhere else and it can count just as well, you see. Muhammad said, don't tell me how educated you are, tell me how much you've traveled. I just love that because it to me is true. And when I think about the challenges we have in our divided nation today, in all the discourse and all the fear, wow, I really think if everybody could travel, everybody could take a pilgrimage, if everybody could be thoughtful on the road and come home, we would have a much healthier society. It's a beautiful, constructive thing. So I have just sort of been on a pilgrimage for 1/3 of my adult life. As I said, living out a little carry on the airplane side bag away from home. And I've loved it. It's been a beautiful part of my story. And one thing great about being on the road, to me, I'm a Christian. If you have a faith, you're never alone. You can be on top of a mountain, you're not alone. You've got, God and Jesus with you and so on. And this is my culture. My parents came from Norway, so I happen to be Lutheran, okay? But I just am thankful for this appetite to find out what's going on. Why am I here? What really matters? Who's my creator and so on. As you travel, you have a rich opportunity. And kind of my goal is to, help people have a good vacation, help people learn, and help people be transformed. 3 different things: tourist, travelers, pilgrims. You can travel just as a tourist. That's the standard thing. You can travel as a traveler. I think that's great. And you can travel as a pilgrim. That's setting the bar pretty high. Now, I don't think you need to be some monk going over there and walking around in bare feet and so on, but I do think you can mix it all together. That's the good thing. When I take a group around Europe, I'm mixing in the road as playground, the road as school, and the road as church, mosque, synagogue, whatever you want to call that. See, that's to me the goal, and I love it. So we talk about travel as, for 30, 40 years, I've been teaching this, and I've sort of got this Maslow's hierarchy of teaching priorities. I call it Maslow's traveler's hierarchy of needs, Maslow's hierarchy of traveler's needs. And if you remember Maslow's hierarchy, you start with the basic stuff, and then you get into more creative stuff and more self-actualization stuff. Well, in the beginning of my teaching, it was all about packing light, staying safe, getting a good meal, finding a roof over your heads, catching the train. That was Europe through the back door, the skills, the bottom thing. And then I slid up to Europe 101, history and art for travelers, appreciating the cuisine, the wine, the culture. And then since 9/11, basically, my passion as a travel teacher has been to encourage Americans to stop being so ethnocentric and to realize that we are 4% of this planet and there's 96% of the planet out there, and it's good to get to know the neighbors. That's that top, that pinnacle of Maslow's hierarchy of travel needs. And that would be related to this notion that the tourist, consumption, the traveler, immersion, the pilgrim, transformation. The road is playground, school, or church. So I spend 100 days a year. I'm going to 100 days this year. I spent 100 days last year in Europe, mostly alone, working on my guidebooks, learning, typing it into my laptop, working on my TV shows, working on my tours and so on. And I get in a situation where people hire me to go around the country and talk about travel as a spiritual act. I gave a all-day Saturday seminar at the Yale Divinity School Seminary about that. And I thought, I'm no theologian. I can dress up like a theologian, but I'm just a traveler. But every time I work with people who are religious leaders, they tell me, your theology is great. You're just a child of the road, you know? It's really exciting to give yourself a chance to think about that. And you don't need to dress up like a great reformer. So the road as church, I was trying to think about that, you know, for this talk. What would that mean? Well, monotheists believe there's one God with a lowercase g, and that God is God with a capital G. You know, when Muslims pray, they say there is one God and he is Allah. It kind of makes a lot of Westerners and Christians kind of nervous. But 5 times a day, that's what they stop what they're doing and they pray, there is one God and he is Allah. What that means is there's a lot of things you can worship. There's a lot of gods out there, lowercase g, but there's one God. And that's the guy Christians call God. Spanish Christians called, Dios. Arab speakers called Allah. Allah is the same as God, period. People freak out about Allah. When my dad used to be very afraid of Islam. In fact, when my son, who's 35 years old, was about 3 years old, when we would have grandma and grandpa over for dinner, I taught my son, after we said our prayers for dinner, to go, Allah, 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 just to freak out my dad. It's my hard tour guide instinct to get people out of their comfort zone and let them just relax. We're all in this together. Allah, Allah, Allah. There's one God, lowercase, and he is the God. That's the monotheistic approach to our religion. We're all, okay, if that's true, if you buy that, if there a God, you don't need to ever go to church or anything like that to think, yeah, there's somebody up, a maker up there. It's not a man or a woman or anything like that. It's kind of silly to debate that. It's a creating force or whatever. We think of it as this heavenly Father. Well, if there is a creator, we are all children of that God. And that means we are all brothers and sisters. Whether we are blood brothers and sisters, whether we live in the same town, whether we got the same color skin, or whether we are as different as can be as human beings, we're all brothers and sisters of the same heavenly Father. And when we travel, we get to know the family. What's not to like about that? Thomas Jefferson said, travel makes a person wiser, if less happy. I embrace that. I really embrace that. A lot of people wish the rest of the world would go away and we were just our tribe, you know? Let's build walls. If you travel, you build bridges. And you want to get to know the family. It complicates your life. It might even make you less happy. But it's the truth. Suffering across the street is no more sad than suffering across the sea. Christians believe, and now what distinguishes Christians from the other monotheists is that Jesus came to bring us grace and salvation by showing us the way. The way is the journey. In Spanish, that would be the Camino de Santiago. The very first Christians called themselves the Way. That was the first name before there was the term Christians. I love to remind myself how ethnocentric I am, and my students how ethnocentric they are. You could be the coolest, most globally minded kid on the block, and you're still ethnocentric. It's just our default, you know. Jesus is white and spoke English. Well, we're not probably that ethnocentric, but I do find it interesting that we are comfortable with a portrayal of Jesus that looks like us in our churches. And when you go to Sri Lanka or Guatemala or Kerala in India, you see a mural like this, and it's just natural. That baby Jesus looks like the children in that community. And they probably are ethnocentric like we are in our approach to our faith. But I just love these religious posters, kind of political religious posters that are ethnocentric. As a pilgrim, we need to be packing light. As a good traveler, traveler, we need to be packing light. And I just love that nimbleness, that mobility, that not encumbered with a lot of material possessions and comforts. The simpler I am, the closer I am to where I'm going to travel. I just need a bed. Now, I need more than this bed, but there was a time when I thought that was a good bed. This is $10 and you get a kitten tossed in for no extra. But we just need a place to sleep and a place to put our bag, and we are pilgrims. It's funny that, I mean, I must have been 22 years old there. It's funny that all of us have memories of that kind of rugged ability, but I don't think most of us could do that now. I don't think I could. But those were the greatest trips. Just last year, I was in Paris marveling at how great it is to feel small in this world. That's one cool thing about travel. It really humbles you. You realize how vast this planet is, how diverse it is. And I just like to be small. Then I can appreciate the bigness of creation. And I love a simple meal on top of a ridge. Isn't that that's a feast right there. That is a sandwich stolen from breakfast, an apple split with my hiking partner, and a carrot. And I'm on top of a ridge. I'm a pilgrim. I'm really close to heaven. When we travel, we need to travel with our window rolled down. I learned that even as a kid in my 20s on the road. We need to not protect ourselves from the reality out there. We have to have an appetite for the hard reality. And for most of us, the reality is when we travel, we're hanging out with people who may never see their name on a plane ticket. And, it can tug on our hearts, but that might make our lives more complicated, and we withdraw into the gated comfort of our safe hotel and so on. Well, we have to be practical and not endanger ourselves, but we also have to expose ourselves to the realities on this planet. And that means travel with your window down and your heart open. I love reminders on the road of our mortality. I really do. And when you're in Europe, you find a lot of bone houses, and different monastic orders will hang up their dead brothers to dry in the crypt downstairs, decorate with their bones, and then 150 years later charge tourists to come in and see it. This happens to be the Capuchin crypt in Rome. Some of you have probably seen that. And when you step in, you see a sign above the entryway on the arch there. And these are what the monk there told me. We consider these skeletons bodies without souls, And the motto as you step in there is, what you are is what we were. What we are is what you will become. It's just a fun, happy little reminder as you shop around looking for the best place to spend your golden years, So we need to realize that we're not here for long, and we've got a lot of opportunity out there, and we shouldn't be too hung up on our mortality. You earn these experiences. You get blisters. It's good to get blisters on the road. And as a pilgrim, you get close to nature. The closeness to nature was a religion in itself back in the 1800s in Europe. You had these dandies that really, every day they'd walk through the woods to commune with nature. Part of every scholar's daily academic diet at Oxford and Cambridge was to walk through the woods and get close to nature. The big shot, the cultural big shot, wasn't in a fancy salon in Paris, but it was the poet Wordsworth up in the Cumbrian Lake District in North England. And big shots, cultural big shots, would make a cultural pilgrimage all the way up there to walk in the woods with the poet, be immersed in the wonder of nature. I just love that historically, and I love that as a traveler, and I love that as a sightseer and a pilgrim. This is a memory I had. I've been, part of the joy of my work is I get to recall beautiful moments I've had on the road, even as a kid, and then share them in the context of various travel talks in hopes that other people can have those same beautiful moments. But when I was just in my 20s as a student traveling before I was doing it professionally, I'll never forget being on this ridge in the Swiss Alps. In fact, I describe it ever since then, for decades, if you've ever had one of my travel classes, it's just like when you're in the Alps, imagine you're on a ridge high above the lakes in Switzerland. On one side, you got lakes stretching all the way to Germany. On the other side, you got the most incredible Alpine panorama, anywhere the Eiger Monk and Jungfrau. And ahead of you, you hear the long legato tones of an Alphorn announcing that the helicopter-stocked mountain hut is open. It's just around the corner, and the coffee schnapps is on. That is a moment. That is a beautiful moment. Wow. And I went back there just last year. Hadn't been there for 40 years. On that same ridge. And it's just as good now as it was back then. It's just as good to a guy in his mid-60s as it was for a guy in his mid-20s. It's just as likely to make a Lutheran go like this, which is pretty tough to do, you know. But if somebody asks me, what's your favorite cathedral? A lot of times I think the top of the Alps, because I feel so close to heaven when I'm on the top of the Alps on a beautiful day. Healthy, having that little walking on that ridge. Thin places, that's what it is. Thin places. You know, there's you know, our little mortal perception of here we are on earth and up there's heaven. And then there's a lot of stuff between it, the atmosphere. And certain places, it just seems the atmosphere is thinner. Heaven is closer. And I get that on top of a mountain. I get that when I go to certain places. Assisi, the hometown of St. Francis. It's a thin place. People accept this. I mean, if you're going to have an interfaith, ecumenical means within Christianity, different denominations, ecumenical, working together. Oh, Methodists and Lutherans and Catholics working together, that's ecumenical. But interfaith would be Christians, Buddhists, Muslims working together. Interfaith conventions are often held in Assisi, not because the Christian monk Francis was there, but because it's a thin place. And as a traveler, if you let yourself feel that, you do get into that thinness there, having a picnic on top of the ruined castle, overlooking the town of St. Francis, hearing the same bird sound that inspired Francis so many centuries ago. Thin places. I was just filming at Avebury, one of the stone circles in England, and it was the summer solstice. And the Druids were all out because Avebury is a thin place if you happen to be a Druid. And everybody was there with their drums and their dances and so on, enjoying the thin place. Stepping into churches, to me, the architecture, the love, the humanity of it all creates a thin space for me. This is Gaudi's Church of the Sacred Family, Sagrada Familia in Barcelona. It's a beautiful thin spot for me. Iona, where Christianity came to Scotland, feels like a thin, there's just something about it. Things have inspired me on Iona that wouldn't inspire me otherwise. As a pilgrim, you recognize and enjoy thin places. You also really thrive on meeting people. People carbonates your travel experience. To me, the mark of a good traveler is how many people did you meet, not how many cliches did you see on stage with yodeling and slap dancing and so on. That's fun. But how many real people did you get to know? Ever since I was teaching and back when I was a student, I would say, if you see, you got to be an extrovert. Even if you're not an extrovert, be an extrovert. Make those connections. If you see 4 cute guys sitting on a bench, ask them to scoot over. You'll make their day. They still remember me. Well, they're probably not around anymore, but they remembered me for a long, long time, and I certainly still remember them. I've been saying this, and it works. You gotta make room on the bench for you when you're traveling. And throughout my days of travel, I've met so many interesting people that give me an empathy for the diversity of people's life stories and struggles and challenges and so on. Hanging out with a communist who the hammer and sickle really mean something to back before the end of the Cold War. Hanging out with a cabbie in Ethiopia who's in all sorts of turmoil as their country, which is a bunch of tribes that don't like each other, tries to live together. Gaining a new sense of style in the mountains of Guatemala, meeting beautiful people with funny pants, playing checkers with bottle caps on the streets of some capital south of the border and remembering that, hey, this is what people do. They just have wonderful pastimes that they share, licking your gelato, realizing that girls like these, guys like these, enjoy their gelato all over this planet. I love this shot because this little girl, I don't know, I just remember when I was bored with the adult conversation, and they're sitting around the table forever. And I just want to go out to the living room and watch TV or take a nap on the overstuffed chair. She could be in Canada. She could be in Colombia. She could be in India, Sri Lanka, Mexico, Jordan. She's actually in Tehran. She's Iranian, but she could be anywhere. And we often forget that. We love our little girls, but there's just beautiful, beautiful kids all over the place. And every country has its own dreams. We have the American dream. I remember, so well into my adulthood, I thought if somebody didn't have the American dream, they need to be schooled because we've got the dream that is the right dream. No, this is our dream, but the Sri Lankans have the Sri Lankan dream. My Norwegian relatives have the Norwegian dream. This is a family in Sri Lanka, and they've clearly got their dream. And I love to celebrate that everybody has a different dream. And I love to celebrate in my travels, as a good pilgrim would, I think, that we are not the norm. You know that concept of the ugly American? They don't use that term anymore that much, but it means ethnocentric, doesn't it? I mean, it's not a bad person who's the ugly American traveler. It's just the American who thinks that you do it this way, and if you don't do it this way, come on, get your act together. Well, it's not just ugly Americans. When you travel a lot, you know there's ugly Russians, ugly Chinese, ugly Indians, ugly Americans. Those are the big ugly ones. And that's because those are the big, giant countries that can, it's reasonable for them to think they're right, that they're the norm. But you don't have ugly Swedes or ugly Estonians or ugly Nepalis. They understand they're small enough that they're not the norm. When we travel, we need to be humbled with our ethnocentricity. A good example of that, I was in Ethiopia backpacking through there a long time ago, and I just sat down for lunch at the cafeteria in Kabul where all the backpackers do. And a man he just joined me, and he said, "Can I join you?" And I said, "You already have." And he said, "Are you an American?" I said, "Yes." He said, "I'm a professor here in Afghanistan, and I want you to know that a third of the people on this planet eat with spoons and forks like you. A third of the people eat with chopsticks, and a third of the people eat with their fingers like I do, and we're all civilized just the same." We're all, I remember that, just like he said it today. We're all civilized just the same. And I thought, boy, you got a chip on your shoulder about this. And I left and I traveled on, and it occurred to me, he was right. I thought less of him because he ate with his fingers. And, you know, there's silverware in the drawer, but a third of humanity enjoys eating with their fingers because that's what God gave them to us for. It's just holistic to nourish yourself with your fingers. It just feels better. For the rest of that trip, I ate with my fingers throughout South Asia, and I got quite comfortable with that. In fact, I had to be retrained when I got home. I went to, and then throughout India, I went to, find restaurants that were not touristy at all. They were just filled with locals who, well-dressed professional locals. And there were no silverware in there. People just did not want to stick a dirty metal utensil in their mouth when they were eating. I'm sure there was silverware in the drawer, but there was a ceremonial sink in the middle of the room where they'd wash their hands and they would use their fingers to eat. So I was thankful to have that little experience, silly little thing, just to remind me that we're not the norm. It's a very good reminder. So we have that ethnocentricity we can challenge in our travels, and that's a healthy thing, especially if you come from a big country that's inclined to be ethnocentric, like the United States of America. And then there's a concept that I'm just working on now. Ethnocentricity takes you across cultures this way. Chronocentric. We are 2023. More than ever, we're looking at things through 2023 eyes, and we're condemning things from a generation ago because it's not at our standards, if you know what I mean. You can judge everything by our sensibilities today, but I'm a historian and I know we're all on an evolutionary track and we're trying to figure things out. And we've had our Reformation, we've had our revolution, we've had our Vatican II, we've had whatever, and we are where we are after that long struggling evolution. Other societies are a little behind us. We're all on parallel evolutionary tracks. And we have to cut people some slack if they're not quite as hip as we are by our judgment. And I love when I look at things as a tour guide, a travel writer, or just a traveler, try to see things on its terms, in its age. Who paid for it? Why? What was going on back then? not judge them by falling short of our moral standards, but what was going on then. And I've known that from my travels. I mean, here's St. Peter's Basilica, the most important and most beautiful church in Christendom. The spiritual headquarters of 1 billion Roman Catholic Christians. And when you step inside, whoa, it just takes your breath away. Now, for many years, I went in there as an angry Protestant. I was just in a bad mood, actually pissed off, because think of all the money they spent 500 years ago when there was all that real need, and all they did was build this razzle-dazzle to try to impress God. Very, very ethnocentric, very, very chronocentric. 500 years ago, this was the best they could do to get close to God and to glorify God and to create a worshipful place, I think. I give it credit for that. You could be skeptical about it, but I learned to park my Lutheran sword at the door and go in as a temporary Roman Catholic. And it was a much nicer experience. Beautiful experience. And I do that in mosques. I do that in temples. I do that in synagogues. I do that when I'm traveling. I want to be a cultural chameleon. I like to change from culture to culture. Because again, we are 4% of this planet. And there's 96% out there. And yes, a lot of us Americans think we are exceptional. But I think the only thing exceptional about us, really, in God's eyes, is our ability to think that we are exceptional. And if you're a good pilgrim, you'll get over that. When you go to these sites, you need to know what you're looking at. The more you bring with you, the more you'll get out of your sightseeing, your travel experience. And that's one of our themes at my company and in my teaching and guidebooks and so on. I mean, you're going to pay the same to go into this museum or that gallery and so on. But if you bring some understanding with you, it's a better experience. It's amazing to me. It's sad to me how many people have the opportunity to go to these amazing places and they don't even know who this guy is. You go to St. Peter's Basilica. You keep seeing a guy with a big bushy beard with keys. Of course, it's St. Peter. You got to know that. And then when you step in, you're looking up at that dome, taller than a football field on end, the biggest dome that had ever been built, designed by Michelangelo. And you see in 6-foot tall, mosaic letters in Latin, Tu es Petrus. You are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church. It's amazing that they built that 500 years ago. And I just get overcome with I don't know, it's a very sensuous experience to go there with your heart open and to see it on its terms. This shot here reminds me that there are people all over this planet with their worldview, with their baggage, and with their challenges that we could be the smartest person in the room and we could still be totally oblivious to it. We have to be humble about that. And we got to understand that everybody has their baggage, and it's important for us to give everybody a little wiggle room with their baggage, just like we hope other people that don't understand our baggage would give us a little wiggle room because we have this outlook for good reasons, We live in a very fearful time right now as a society. I've been tuned into this because I've been encouraging people to travel for 40 years. And people are nervous about the world. I remember when people said bon voyage. Do you remember that? There was a time when you were going to go somewhere, bon voyage. When was the last time somebody said bon voyage to you? It doesn't happen. What do they say? Have a safe trip. We'll pray for you. You sure you should be going over there considering all that's going on? You got kids after all. Geez, when somebody tells me I have a safe trip, I'm inclined to say, well, you have a safe stay at home. Because statistically, and I know statistics are optional for many Americans these days, but statistically, I'm sorry, just look at it from a cold statistical analysis. Statistically, it's safer over there than it is here. Europeans laugh out loud when they hear that Americans are staying home for safety reasons. If you care about your loved ones, you will take them to Europe tomorrow. This is how I sell tours. So remember, there's a lot of fear, and some great respected guy said, we have nothing to fear but fear itself. That used to be a big deal before we were so fearful. Now people don't bring it up because it's kind of embarrassing because so many Americans are riddled by fear. The only thing we have to fear is fear. So what does that mean? Fear can be used against us. People who want to manipulate us and get our way, capitalize on our fear. Media that wants to charge more for its advertising capitalizes on our fear. And then we become victims of that. Fear is for people who don't get out very much. The flip side of fear is understanding. And we gain understanding when we travel. This is pretty fundamental. We gain understanding when we travel. So I just think it's never been more important for Americans to get out there and get to know the world. We live in a globalized community. It's going to get smaller, not bigger. And we cannot build walls and be safer. The irony is, the more walls we build, the less safe we'll be. And when you're a traveler, when you're a pilgrim, you come home with the most beautiful souvenir, and that is an interest not in building walls, but in building bridges to better get to know our neighbors. So get to know our enemies. This is one thing that I just am inclined to do. If my government says I can't go somewhere, that's on my bucket list. Can't go to Palestine, shouldn't go to Iran, can't go to Cuba. Those three places have been in my top list of great travel experiences in the last decade. Cuba, Iran, Palestine. It's not as comfortable as Hawaii, but if you want a travel experience, there's nothing like it. It's so good to hang out with people who are supposed to be our enemies. In fact, it makes the world a safer place because then we humanize who Americans are. And it makes it tougher for this Cuban's propaganda to dehumanize us, right? Because he knows what an American is more than his government's propaganda. And when we go home, it makes it tougher for our propaganda to dehumanize him. And our government needs to dehumanize our enemies, so it's easier to go to war with them, and we don't all get sad about killing people. You know, that's a harsh thing to say, but that's just what countries do when they have to go to war. Get to know the enemy. It's a beautiful thing. That's one reason I went to Iran. A few years ago, we went to Iran with our TV crew. I wanted to make a 1-hour special on Iran just because I was worried we were going to go to war. And I wanted people to understand who we were going to war with. And my concern was smart Americans, what they knew about Iran, they learned from Ted Koppel in the hostage crisis. I would imagine most of us in this room, what we know about Iran, we learned from Ted Koppel and a media stunt called the hostage crisis. That's a pathetic way to understand a rich society of 70 million people that could be our adversary and still is our adversary. We just don't know Iranians. I wanted to humanize Iran. People ask me, why are you going to Iran? And I remember I said, I was saying, I think it's good style to know people before you bomb them. I'm not a pacifist. Sometimes you got to go to war and you got to bomb people and kill innocent people. It's a tough world out there, but it should hurt. I wanted to humanize Iran. We've killed so many people in the wake of 9/11 without even thinking about it. More grandmothers on the border of Afghanistan died as refugees in a winter because of 9/11 than we lost in 9/11. And we don't give it a second thought. Not a second thought, because we don't know those grandmothers who had to live in tents with no food or water through a cold winter. You know, that's the travel makes a person wiser, if less happy, result of not traveling. So I went to Iran and I was afraid. We almost left our big camera in Athens and took our little sneak camera in, thinking that people wouldn't like us on the streets of Tehran. And we got there and we decided to take our big camera in, and thank goodness we did, because I've never been received so warmly on the streets as I'm working with my TV crew anywhere in we filmed as in Iran, of all places. Tehran's a big city. It's got about 10 million people, I think, and lots of traffic jams and lots of hateful graffiti. I mean, look at that 8-story tall banner Down with the USA, dropping bombs for stripes and skulls for stars. As an American, walking underneath that banner, awkward. Really awkward. But then I reminded myself, this banner's been there longer than anybody in the street has been alive. And they don't live in a free society. Nobody can question that. It's a theocracy dictatorship, basically, you know? So I have to cut the people a little slack because they didn't do that. That's there because their government is afraid and is trying to keep us as the enemy, I think. I was stuck in traffic jams a lot when we were filming there. I remember one time on the first day, it was just quiet and we're stuck, it's silent. And all of a sudden the man in the next car asked my driver to roll down the window like this. He handed over a bouquet of flowers and he said, "Give this to the foreigner in your back seat and apologize for our traffic." Now, I don't think that ever happens on I-5. But that kind of confused me. I mean, that was the reality of Iran for me. Later on, we were stuck in another traffic jam. It's just quiet. And suddenly my driver, he just blurts out, "Death to traffic." And I said, "No, wait a minute. I thought it was death to Israel or death to America." And he said, "No, right now it's death to traffic." And he's just my driver. He's no scholar. He doesn't speak English very well, very broken English. And we're friends. And he's trying to explain to me things about Iran. And I said, "So what is it with you Iranians? Always saying death to everything." And he said, "Well, in Iran, when something is frustrating to us and out of our control, we say death to that." So he's trying to figure out, why do they do that? You know, he's thinking about it himself when it's frustrating and out of our control. And I thought, well, that's kind of like what our word damn the traffic. And I thought when people say death to traffic, they're translating, they're not saying death to, they're speaking Farsi. They're just saying, damn the traffic. Damn Israel, damn the United States, damn election fraud, damn Ahmadinejad, damn Bush, damn Obama. Have I ever thought, death to, like death to teenagers? Well, yes. Now, do I really want them to die and burn in hell for an eternity like I just said? No, it's after midnight. Turn down the music. Death to teenagers. Damn those teenagers. It's just damn, So I don't want to apologize for Iran's bad deeds, but I do want to have a little more nuanced understanding than some bumper sticker that wants us into the trenches in the hateful corner that we happen to be in sometimes, If you travel and meet people, you get a little better understanding of that and you realize what an amazing society it is. And you can go to a mosque service like I did many times, and you can actually, as a TV producer, it occurred to me I could edit this to be a very scary, menacing thing, or I could menace it to look just like the church service I go to on Sunday morning. So many things, it's just the same. It's so the same. As I mentioned, every society has its own baggage, and I think most societies on this planet probably have worse baggage than we've got from 9/11, since 9/11. And just not to minimize our 9/11 baggage, but we lost 3,000 people, all 300 million of us, 20 years ago, and it still shapes our worldview in so many ways. We did things that we're not proud of as a nation because we were hit and we had to, and that's the way it's going to be. Okay. But we should remember that other societies have their baggage too. If we expect people to give us that wiggle room, we got to give them that wiggle room. And Iran certainly has baggage. In fact, their baggage is Iran-Iraq war baggage. They lost 1 million people on their Western Front back in the 1980s when Saddam Hussein, funded by the United States of America, by the way, invaded them. Maybe we don't believe that or want to believe that, but that's just the accepted fact that Saddam, made possible by American money, invaded Iran, and they had all that bloodshed there. Well, when you go to Iran as a traveler, every town, every Edmonds, Mukilteo, Bellingham, and so on, has a martyrs cemetery filled with grief today, just like it was right after that war. Every Friday, people gathering together, remembering lost loved ones. And when you see a widow sitting cross-legged on the tomb of her husband or father or son and weeping, and having done that every Friday for 30 years, and you consider her view of the world and the propaganda that she has had to absorb, and you just imagine what goes on in her mind. It's a sad, sad desperation, I think. And we've got to remember that. We've got to remember that. There's a lot of widows sitting cross-legged on tombs that don't really understand the complexity of this world, and they don't think of us as their savior, that's for sure. On the last day of my filming in Iran, I'm talking about Iran a lot because this is my appetite to get out of my comfort zone. And it's the rich travel experiences. As in a pilgrim, we can do that. You don't need to do anything dangerous. I don't think I've ever done anything that was reckless. I wouldn't go to any war-torn area or anything like that. I'm not crazy about that, But there are opportunities that we all have to witness and talk to people who have real stories to tell. And we go home with that broader perspective. On my last day working in Iran, a well-dressed professional woman came up to me and she said, "Are you an American journalist?" I said, "Yes." And she went like this with her finger on my chest and she says, "I want you to go home and tell the truth. We're united, we're strong, and we just don't want our little girls to be raised like Britney Spears." I thought, we got something to talk about here because I don't either. What was she worried about? Was she worried about the cost of oil, or was she worried about, Israel or something? No, she was worried about incursions from the West, because time and time again, people from the West had come in, throw out their leader and put in the Shah. And then the miniskirts are shorter in Tehran than they are in Paris. That's what they're worried about. She did not want her little girl to be kidnapped, her values kidnapped and corrupted and turned into a boy toy, a crass materialist, and a drug addict. That's kind of hysterical, but that's the propaganda message they get from American sexy pop culture. And whether it's Miley Cyrus or Britney Spears or who knows what, they are worried about regime change, because regime change will mean just that. So it hit me right there. How could 51% of Iran vote for what I considered a nutcase like Ahmadinejad? Remember when that happened? How could they elect that guy? Well, who was his base? Think about it. Was it the sophisticated people in Tehran? No, it was the less educated small town fundamentalists in the countryside. Who was his base? How did he get 51%? What is America dealing with right now? Small town, less educated fundamentalists. Good people. I want to make that clear. Good people, driven by love and riddled with fear, because they need to get out a little more, and because they've let commercial news shape their perspective on the world. The most frightened people in our society are the people with no passports, buried deep in the middle of it, whose worldview is shaped not by travel, but by the TV station they choose to watch. And it makes our country weaker, and it makes our world a more dangerous place. And I was thankful to be able to go to Iran and talk to these people. It's a complicated story. There's no easy answers, but at least I understood. There's some beautiful people there, and they've got their own baggage. And we were able to shoot it and bring it home as a 1-hour TV special. By the way, any of the TV shows I've ever made, Fascism, Holy Land, Ethiopia and Guatemala and the Fight to End Hunger, Iran, my 6-hour art series that just came out a couple weeks ago, you can watch it for free anytime on my website at ricksteves.com. You just click it and you can watch it, or you can watch it on PBS Passport. But it's so fun to be able to have that little platform, thanks to public television, where we don't need advertisers, because we can say things that would scare away advertisers on public television, and to be able to go there and learn. Because today, these girls are grown women 15 years later, and they're the ones in the street right now, standing up against that totalitarian society, demanding the civil liberty to not wear a scarf, which is just the symbolic, top of all the rights that they would like to have in a more modern country. And when I look at those faces, I just don't see any enemies in there. Do you see any enemies in there? I don't see enemies. I see beautiful children of God who are born into that country, and we can all travel and get to know each other. There's a lot of walls on this planet, and metaphorical walls or physical walls. And as travelers, I love the challenge of understanding a wall, whether it was in Berlin or in Belfast or in Jerusalem, walls. You don't know that wall unless you've talked to people on both sides of it. You cannot go to Ireland and talk to a Catholic and understand what's going on. You cannot go to the Holy Land and talk to an Israeli and understand what's going on. It breaks my heart when so many Christian groups go to the Holy Land and they're in the grips of Israeli guides. I love my Israeli guide, but it's as lopsided as the Palestinian guide story. And as travelers, as people who are hungry for the truth, we need to talk to people on both sides. There are two stories. It's exciting. Those walls, oh my goodness, they're dramatic. And in the case of the Holy Land, it's, as I mentioned, 3 different faiths sharing the same real estate, the Dome of the Rock. You go to Bethlehem, where Christians believe Jesus was born, and you find a cacophony of spires. You've got crescents and you've got crosses, Christians and Muslims, eager to be close to the place where Jesus was born. And about an hour's drive away, there's a town called Hebron, where you've got the tomb of Abraham, 4,000 years old. The common prophet, the patriarch of Muslims and Jews, Israelis and Muslims. And that tomb has bulletproof glass halfway up it, because it's under one roof with a synagogue and a mosque. And so Jews and Muslims can worship at their common patriarch. You have to have bulletproof gas, because there's been a lot of blood shed right there by those squabbles between those two faiths. Wow. And as a traveler, you can talk to kids in settlements in the West Bank, little Jewish kids, and they're running around with plastic guns, shooting imaginary Palestinian terrorists. And then you can go to a Palestinian refugee camp and talk with little kids there, and they're running around with plastic guns, shooting Israeli settlers. And you can think, that's terrible. And then you can remember, oh yeah, when I was that age, what did I want for Christmas? Plastic guns. Who was I going to shoot? My parents' enemies. Right? To be honest, there was no apologies about it. I can think of 3 or 4 groups of people that's why I got those plastic guns. I was saddled with my parents' baggage. When you have a wall, the unintended consequence of that wall is people on both sides of the wall can't talk to each other, and they're saddled with their parents' baggage, just like I was as a kid, just like these kids are as kids. If we can take down the walls, we can talk to each other, we can get away from our parents' baggage. As travelers, we can do that. Local people can't cross that wall. My Palestinian guide could not really talk with my Israeli guide, and vice versa. And I could. You can bicycle from where Jesus was born to where he was crucified in 20 minutes, but people who live in those 2 communities, most of them can't get across that wall. Tourists can. As pilgrims, we can. So you make friends with your Jewish guides and friends, and you make friends with some Muslims, and you sort it out. These are my 2 guides, Abi and Kamal, Jewish and Muslim. And I'll never forget finding a parking spot where they could both park legally, which is kind of hard to find in Israel, where Muslims and Jews can park together. And they traded cards and wished they could work together more. Don't go to the Holy Land without going to Palestine, please. Palestine is a beautiful place. It's as different as San Diego and Tijuana economically. There's a 10-fold difference in per capita income. But the West Bank it's 4 million beautiful people. And you gotta go there to understand that. You just gotta go there to understand the beauty of the West Bank. Another mindset we need to have as pilgrims is to deal honestly with the impact of the United States and the developing world. And I've been thinking about Central America and the impact of American international corporations and so on, and banana republics and all that. And I wrote a journal when I was down there, and the subtitle of the journal was "There's Blood on Your Banana." It's a hard thing to deal with. But when you go down there and you talk to real people, you realize how much heartache and how much bloodshed has been because of trade policies and structural poverty designed to keep people down. I remember once, a long time ago, I was really burned out. I needed a vacation. My family and I were planning on going to Mazatlan. And I was fantasizing out a pristine stretch of tropical beach, swept free of local riffraff, just me and my rich white friends, plastic straps on our wrists so we could have all the margaritas we wanted without dirtying our fingers with the local coins. It was going to be a great vacation. Don't act like you're appalled. You've dreamed about the same thing. And my friends told me, Rick, you need to go to San Salvador because it's the 25th anniversary of the assassination of Archbishop Oscar Romero. Wow, what a quandary. I told my family, I'm not going to be any fun on the beach. Sorry, I got to go to El Salvador. Mazatlan or Managua? You've got to decide. Are you going to go to La La Land on the beach in your travels, or are you going to inject a little bit of reality into it? It's hard, but as I joked earlier, our mission is to equip and inspire Americans to venture beyond Orlando. There's one guidebook in the whole world that sells better than the Rick Steves Italy guidebook, and that's the guidebook to Disney World in Orlando. That's a big market. And many people will go there all their lives, and that's the limit of their travels. And I just think, sure, go there 4 or 5 times, but sooner or later, go to Managua. Give Mazatlan a break. Archbishop Oscar Romero stood with the landless peasants in Central America. He empowered the peasants to stand up for the dignity that they needed back when they were really being crushed down by corporate power. And he said, I'll be assassinated, but I'll rise in my people. And then during Mass one Sunday, he was shot down by death squads in El Salvador. And he rose in his people. And I've been down there on several reality trips, several pilgrimages. And on that 25th anniversary of the assassination of Romero, I was in solidarity with the peasants who lived in that country. Granted, I'm a round-trip revolutionary, so it's no big heroic thing. But for me, it was really good to be there and in solidarity with these people and to understand their baggage, which is all very powerful. Oh my goodness. And we walked, and it was so powerful. And it culminated on their main square where they have this monument. And when I first saw that monument, I thought, wait a minute, that's our monument. That's the Vietnam Memorial. What's it doing down here in Central America? And they said, well, yeah, that's the same design as your Vietnam Memorial. And there's just as many people chipped into that marble. There's 60,000 names, but these are names of people who died fighting the United States, essentially. Now, maybe they're all communist and we needed to kill them. That's a whole different discussion, and I don't even want to go there. But the fact is, here's a society with 5 million people that lost as many people as we lost in Vietnam. That's a huge multiple of our grief, if you think about it. And we need to appreciate that. The world is filled with that kind of baggage. And to go there and to be with those people and to understand what was the cost of that and what could we have done to avoid it. It's so exciting. Half of the people on this planet are living on $5 a day or less. That's just poverty, and that's kind of the reality. But 10% of our planet is living on $2 or less. And that's extreme poverty. That's hopeless. And that makes our world a less stable place. And from just a compassion point of view, it's inexcusable that we've got such wealth here. And there's that desperation south of the border. $2 a day. The average lot for women in life for half of this planet is to abandon your families and walk for water every morning, 3 or 4 hours, and then walk again for firewood because they don't have electricity and they don't have running water. That's the women's lot in life. And when you travel, this is what I did when I went to Ethiopia and Guatemala, making my 1-hour TV show called Hunger and Hope, Lessons Learned in Ethiopia and Guatemala, which anybody could watch anytime on my website. But I just had an amazing experience humanizing what extreme poverty is. And I don't do it to feel guilty. I'm not guilty at all. We work hard. We have a winning system. We get to be wealthy. But I want to know about this. And I want to know about the impact of modern development aid and how a little tiny bit of our tax dollars, maybe 1%, goes to helping people like this who are in desperation. And I see what modern development aid does when you give a child adequate healthcare, adequate nutrition, and a little education. All they do is go to school till 6th grade. That's enough. I'm not overreaching here. That's the successful society on a global scale, and we can help make that happen if we have traveled, if we have opened up our hearts. And the theme in my sort of fighting hunger kind of message is, even if in the privacy of the voting booth, you don't love your neighbor. Because a lot of Christians when it comes to voting. Vote for what's best for them, not what's best for people south of the border, truth be told. That's okay. I framed it this way. Even if you're motivated only by greed, if you know it's good for you, you don't want to be filthy rich in a desperately poor world. It's not a nice place for your children to grow up in. It is so obvious when you've traveled, the value of investing in making our world a more just place. And we could do it. We could do it. For the money we spent in Afghanistan, we could have solved hunger, $1 trillion. That development aid is so smart these days. We've got a gap between rich and poor in our country, which is quite striking and should be of concern. When you go south of the border, you see where you extrapolate that gap between rich and poor, where it's heading. Because in Guatemala and Honduras and Nicaragua, you've got an armed guard in front of every hotel, in front of every pharmacy, and in front of every bank. When we start seeing armed guards in front of our banks, we're getting in that direction. And as I said, even if you're motivated only by greed, even if you can afford designer fortifications, that's not a pretty picture. And I'm so thankful for the burden of knowing that these little kids are just as precious as our little kids. As a pilgrim who understands we're all children of God, they are just as precious. Now, my daughter had $5,000 for braces and money left over for whitener. And again, that's not a guilt trip. It's just a reality. My girl gets straight teeth, and your kids probably did too. But for the cost of one set of braces, you could drill a well in a thirsty community and give everybody in that town healthy running water. And all the moms in that town, instead of walking across the county every morning for water, could walk across the square. And even if you're not doing it because you love your neighbor, even if you're doing it just because it's a practical investment into stability, think about the value of that well. Every morning, every mom in that town, when they pump that well and get that life-giving water, what do they think? God bless America. God bless America. Give me some more of that water. For the cost of one extra soldier, it takes $1 million a year to keep a soldier overseas. For the cost of one extra soldier, we have to have soldiers over. We have to have 100 military bases in 100 different countries. That's what we have to do. But one extra soldier costs the same as 100 wells. It's more than that. It's 200 wells, but I say 100 to be more believable. 100 wells. Now, what makes us safer, hard power or soft power? I would make the case that the soft power of having all those moms stay with their kids and say, God bless America every morning, that's a good practical investment. That's a challenge we get when we travel. Every time I see a well in a formerly thirsty community, I just say, thank you. Every Sunday in our church, we have a little extra offering for making a well. It's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful thing. The most impactful moment in all of my travels, I think when I was on my very first trip, 14 years old in Oslo, with my parents visiting relatives in Norway. We were behind the palace in Oslo in a big park called Frogner Park, filled with statues by Gustav Vigeland. And I remember I was just a little self-centered kid, and my parents were just loving me. And I knew they didn't have a lot of money. It was their first trip to Europe, and they were compromising hugely to take their little boy to Europe with them. They were loving me inexplicably. And then I remember looking around that park, and it was just speckled with other families, parents loving their kids as much as my parents loved me. And it occurred to me, whoa, this world is home to billions of equally precious little children of God. It was such a beautiful wake-up call that we are not more worthy or special as all the other little kids. Now, 4 months ago, I became a grandfather. This is baby Atlas. It's a great name. And it gives me a whole new immediacy to this kind of talk, because I know how much I love my daughter and my new little grandson. And at the same time, I know that my love for Jackie and Atlas is no greater and no more valuable than this man's love for his little child. And there's so many beautiful families like this. The world is filled with joy. It's filled with love. It's filled with beautiful people. And when we travel, we celebrate that. I'm going to have Q&A in just a minute, but I want to finish with a little experience I love to share as a tour guide. In Turkey, they have in Islamic countries, they have the whirling dervishes. And these are monks who plant one foot in their hometown and the other foot goes around and celebrates the diversity in God's great creation. And one hand goes up to accept the love of their creator, and the other hand goes down like the spout on a tea kettle and showers God's love on his creation, on his hometown, and on all of the diversity in his great creation. And 5 times a day, a dervish whirls himself into a meditative trance and becomes a conduit of God's love. And as a pilgrim, I love to try to take my Christian style of faith and put it in the trappings of another religion. And it just works fine. And I can plant my foot in my hometown and my loved ones. And I can celebrate the diversity in this planet. And I can remember the love of our Creator. And I can meditate on how I can be a conduit of that love through whatever I do. What Martin Luther would call the priesthood of all believers. And I just love to lose myself in that idea and work hard and be thankful for our opportunity to travel and get to know our world better by mixing a little bit of pilgrimage into our vacation. Thank you very much.